Okay, so we're looking at using the identities from yesterday, tan theta sine over cos, and sine squared theta plus cos squared theta is equal to 1. And then the ones that we said we could subtract the sine squared or we could subtract the cos squared. And this is all the same squares identity. And we're going to use the identities, and we're going to use the cos diagram. So you guys remember your cos diagram. Okay, theta's in the first quadrant, and also 90 minus theta. 180 plus theta, 180 minus theta in the second quadrant, and also 90 plus theta is also a second quadrant angle. 180 plus theta in the third, and 360 minus theta, as well as negative theta in the fourth. So we're going to use the cos diagram, the identities, and we're going to identify the quadrant. We're going to reduce, remembering your sign. You're going to watch out for your co-ratios. Remember, your 90s change sign to cos and cos to sine. And then we're going to simplify. Sometimes a simplify is going to involve a replacement. So these are the steps we're going to be working through to help us simplify these trig expressions. Okay, so here's the first one. We've got sine 90 plus theta, tan 180 minus theta divided by sine of 360 plus theta. I've just written our steps here: reduce, replace, simplify. This one must go through your head. And we've got a little cos diagram on the side, which is what you would have to look at. All right, so where do we start? We start by identify. So which quadrant am I working in? Well, this first one is in the second quadrant, 90 plus theta. But I'm going to underline the 90 because I've got to remember that that 90 changes sign into cos. So it's really important that you focus on 90s when you see them. Okay, tan of 180 minus, that's second. And sine of 360 plus theta. Well, I've got that on my cos diagram. It's in the first quadrant. Or you could say, well, I can't see it, so let's subtract 360. And then you can see it would be equal to the sine of theta, which is a first quadrant angle. All right, so I've identified, So now I'm going to reduce, watch your sign, and watch your co-ratios. So those are things you have to be careful of. All right, so sine in the second is positive. So it's going to be positive cos, because the 90 changes sign into cos of theta. Okay, so watch your co-ratios. Okay, next one, tan in the second is negative. So it's negative tan of theta. And sine in the first is positive, so it's positive sine of theta. You obviously don't need to write those positive signs, but you can if you want to. Okay, right, so I have identified, I've reduced. So now I go on to replace. So are they special angles? And the answer here is no. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to replace tan, because it doesn't simplify, it doesn't cancel with anything, with sine over cos. Okay, so we're replacing special angles if there are any, but there aren't, and tan with sine over cos. So I'm going to do my replacement. So the negative sine theta over cos theta. Please don't write two negatives. Okay, if you wrote a negative over a negative, that would give you a positive tan. You need to make sure that the negative just stays in front of your fraction. Okay, so there's my replacement. So now I'm going to do simplify. So look at the numerator. I'm multiplying a whole number with a fraction, so I'm going to put that one over 1. You've got a positive times a negative, which will give you a negative. And then the cos would be that one at the bottom, because this is one term, and one term would cancel with that one there. Okay, so what am I left with? I simplified the numerator and I got negative sine theta. What do I have at the bottom? Sine theta. And now this is also one term over one term, so I can cancel sine theta into there once and once. So I'm left with negative 1 over 1, which is negative 1. So when we were doing our simplifications, you need to do your numerator and we need to multiply in that numerator. And then we're going to do our division. Okay. So we're just doing normal algebra rules. So this is algebra rules. Okay, so simplify with algebra. Okay, here's another one. Again, we've got our little cos diagram there. We remember also that we might be using tan is sine over cos, and we might be using sine squared theta plus cos squared theta is equal to 1. So those are the things we need to remember. All right, so first we go and we identify. So this is a negative x, it's in the fourth quadrant. I'm underlining my 90 because it's a co-ratio, and this would be in the second quadrant. This is in the third quadrant, and again, negative x is in the fourth quadrant. So I've done my identify. Okay, and I've also checked for my co-ratios. Okay, now I do my reduce. So we watch our sine and we watch our co-ratios. So when we're doing our reductions, watch your sine and watch your co-ratios. Okay. All right, so sine in the fourth quadrant is negative. So it's negative sine x. Cos in the second quadrant is negative. And remember the 90 changes cos into sine. All right, then we've got this minus sign between the two terms, because this is two terms. Cos in the third is negative. And cos in the fourth is positive. All right, so just checking. Do I have anything that I need to replace? No, I've got no special angles and I don't have any tan to replace. So I go on to simplify. So we've got 1, 2 terms. So I'm going to multiply each term before I can add and subtract. Okay, so here we've got a negative times a negative is a positive. Sine times sine is sine squared. Here we've got a negative times a positive, which will give me a positive. Cos times cos is cos squared. Okay, now, if you remember, we've just said that sine squared plus cos squared is equal to 1. So because this is an identity at the end here, I can change this into 1. Sine squared x plus cos squared x is equal to 1. All right, number 3. Here we go. Identify the quadrants. Where is this one? Well, this is a numerical angle, and it's between 180 and 270, so it's a third quadrant angle. And do you remember, with a third quadrant angle, it's got to be 180 plus something. 180 plus theta. Okay, so you have to rewrite that one. This is third as well, 180 plus. Cos, there we go, watch the 90 again. So that's a first quadrant angle. Just put it at the end there. Be careful of my 90. And this one, well, this isn't on my cos diagram, so I have to go and I have to add 360 so I know where it is. So it wasn't on my cos diagram, so I need to add or subtract 360 depending on what your angle is. All right, so let's do that quickly. So we've got tan. We need to rewrite this one. So it's got to be 180 plus 45. There we go. I'm just going to leave these other ones until I need to do my reductions. So at the bottom here, I'm going to have cos of theta. Negative 360 plus 360 gives me theta. Okay, so now I can recognize that this is in the first quadrant, so that's sorted. We said this was third, and we've rewritten it. Remember, a numerical angle we need to rewrite. So we've rewritten the numerical angle, and we've seen that we know where all of those are. First quadrant. Okay, now we're going to reduce. Remember, we've got to look out for the sign and co-ratios. So tan in the third is positive. So it's positive tan of what is acute angle? 45 there. Okay, there's a positive sign between these two terms. Okay, sine in the third is negative sine. And what is acute angle? It's a theta. Cos in the first is positive. But remember, the 90 changes cos into sine. And then this is a first quadrant angle, so we don't have to worry about it at the bottom there, cos of theta. Okay. Where are we now? Reduce, replace. So do I have special angles? Yes, I do. And if we think of 45, there's my special angle triangle, the tan of 45 is 1 over 1. So this is going to be 1 over 1. Okay, let's look at this term here. We've got a positive times a negative, which gives me a negative, and sine times sine is sine squared over cos theta. Okay, now 1 over 1 is obviously just 1, so we write 1 minus sine squared over cos. All right, do you recognize a 1 minus sine squared? Remember we said cos squared plus sine squared is equal to 1. So cos squared was equal to cos squared theta was equal to 1 minus sine squared theta. So I can replace the 1 minus sine squared at the top here with cos squared. So that's going to be cos squared theta over cos squared theta. Cos squared theta over cos theta. And now we've got one term over one term, so we can divide cos into their ones. If we divide it into the top, we'd be left with cos theta. So the answer to this question is going to be cos theta. Okay, so we're kind of putting everything together. We're putting together our identities. If we have a tan, we're going to replace it with sine over cos. We've got to look out for 1 minus sine squared, 1 minus cos squared, sine squared plus cos squared, and then remember all of our reductions. So there's a lot to remember, and you're going to have to just practice some examples.